Have you ever stayed somewhere long after you knew you should have left? A job, a friendship, a relationship, a family role. And every time someone asked why you were still there, you had an answer ready. I'm loyal. I don't give up on people. I stick around when things get hard. But be honest for a second. Was it really loyalty? Or was it fear, wearing a nicer name so you didn't have to look at it directly? This video is going to say something most people don't want to hear. A lot of what gets called loyalty is actually fear. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of what people will think if you leave. And once you can see that clearly, something changes. You stop confusing staying with strength, and you start asking a better question. Am I here because I choose to be, or because I'm scared of what happens if I'm not? Carl Jung spent his life studying the parts of ourselves we hide, even from ourselves. He said that what we don't face directly ends up running our lives anyway. We just give it a different name so it feels acceptable. Fear is one of those things. It rarely shows up looking like fear. It shows up dressed as loyalty, as patience, as being the bigger person. And as long as it's wearing that costume, you'll never actually deal with what's underneath it. Let's take that costume off. Here's the first thing to understand. Real loyalty and fear-based staying can look exactly the same from the outside. Both keep you in the same place. Both come with a good excuse. The difference is invisible to everyone else, and sometimes even invisible to you, until you ask one simple question. If nothing bad happened if I left, would I still choose to stay? If the honest answer is yes, that's loyalty. You're there because you want to be, not because you're afraid of the alternative. But if the honest answer involves anything like, but what would people think, or, but I don't know how I'd survive without this, that's not loyalty anymore, that's fear. And it's been borrowing loyalty's name for a long time. Think about a person who stays in a relationship where they're clearly not happy. Ask them why, and they'll usually say something noble. I made a commitment. I don't want to hurt them. I believe in fighting for love. All of that can be true, but underneath it often is something much simpler and much less flattering. The fear of being alone, the fear of admitting the relationship failed, the fear of starting over at this age. With this much history already invested, none of that is shameful. It's human, but it's not loyalty. And calling it loyalty just makes it harder to ever look at honestly. The same thing happens at work. Someone stays in a job that drains them for years, telling themselves they're loyal to the company, loyal to their team, loyal to the years they've already put in. But loyalty to a company doesn't usually explain why leaving feels terrifying. Fear of the unknown does. Fear of not knowing if you can start over somewhere else. Fear that your skills won't matter anywhere but here. That fear is real, and it deserves to be named honestly instead of hidden behind a word that sounds so much better. So why does the mind do this? Why turn fear into loyalty instead of just admitting what it actually is? Because fear on its own feels weak. Nobody wants to say, I'm staying because I'm scared. It sounds small, it sounds like giving in. But loyalty sounds noble. It sounds like a virtue, something you'd be proud to put on a resume of your character. So the mind does something clever. It takes the fear and it wraps it in a better story, one that turns staying into a choice you made on purpose, instead of a fear you never faced. This isn't something people do on purpose, and it isn't dishonesty in the usual sense. It's protection. If you can tell yourself you're staying because you're loyal, you never have to sit with the harder truth that some part of you is scared to leave. That's a much more uncomfortable thing to admit. So the mind quietly swaps it out for something easier to live with. This swap usually starts early, long before the job or the relationship that's testing it now. A lot of people learn as kids that leaving is dangerous. Maybe a parent left and it broke something in the family. Maybe love in that house came with conditions, and staying no matter what felt like the only way to keep it. Maybe the household rewarded the kid who never made waves, who never said this isn't working, who just kept showing up quietly year after year. That kid grows up believing that staying equals being good and leaving equals being the problem. Nobody sat them down and taught them this directly. It got learned the way most deep beliefs get learned, through years of watching what got praised and what got punished. Once that belief is in place, it doesn't need a reason to activate. It just runs automatically. So when an adult version of that same kid finds themselves in a relationship or a job that isn't working, the old belief kicks in before any real thinking happens. Leaving equals bad. Staying equals good. And loyalty is simply the word that belief reaches for to explain itself, because loyalty sounds like a choice, and fear sounds like a wound. Here's a distinction worth holding on to, because it's easy to lose in a conversation like this. Real loyalty exists. It's not fake, and this video isn't trying to talk you out of it. Real loyalty means choosing someone or something again and again freely, even when it would be easier not to. It comes from care, not panic. It has room in it for honesty, even hard honesty, even the kind that risks the relationship itself. Fear-based staying looks similar, but works completely differently underneath. It doesn't leave room for honesty, because honesty feels dangerous. It doesn't feel like choosing. It feels like being stuck. And it usually comes with a specific kind of exhaustion, a background hum of dread that real loyalty doesn't carry, because real loyalty, even when it's hard, still feels like something you're doing on purpose. Here's a simple way to tell them apart. Real loyalty can survive a hard conversation. If you could sit down and say exactly what's bothering you out loud, and the relationship or the job could survive that honesty, that's a sign you're there by choice. Fear-based staying usually can't survive that same conversation, and some part of you already knows it, which is exactly why the hard conversation never happens. You keep the peace instead, and call keeping the peace loyalty, when really it's just fear trying to avoid finding out what would happen if you spoke. Another way to tell them apart is how you feel when you imagine leaving. Real loyalty, when you imagine walking away, usually brings up sadness, a sense of loss, because you genuinely be giving something up that mattered to you. Fear-based staying, when you imagine leaving, usually brings up something closer to panic, a flood of worst-case scenarios, a sense that leaving would be unsurvivable rather than simply sad. Sadness says you'll miss something real. Panic says you're scared of something you haven't actually tested. Here's a small, practical version of this test you can try on any situation in your life right now. Picture the thing you've been calling loyalty, a job, a friendship, a family role. Now imagine, just for a moment, that leaving came with zero consequences, no judgment from anyone, no financial risk, no fear of starting over, nothing. If none of that existed, would you still choose to stay simply because you value it? If the honest answer is yes, you found real loyalty underneath. If the honest answer is a long pause or an uncomfortable no, you found the fear that's been wearing loyalty's name. So what do you actually do with this once you see it clearly? The first step is just naming it honestly, even privately, even if you never say it out loud to anyone else. Not, I'm loyal to this job. Instead, I'm scared to leave this job, and here's specifically what I'm scared of. Naming the actual fear, in plain words, takes away a lot of its power. Fear that stays vague and unnamed can control you quietly for years. Fear that gets written down in a single honest sentence starts to look a lot smaller and a lot more manageable than it did in the dark. Try this concretely. Take a piece of paper or open a note on your phone and finish this sentence as honestly as you can. If I left, the thing I'm most afraid would happen is, don't judge the answer. Don't try to make it sound reasonable. Just write down the real one. For some people, it's, I'm afraid I'll never find anyone else. For others, it's, I'm afraid I'll fail on my own and prove everyone right about me. Whatever comes out, that sentence is usually closer to the truth than anything the word loyalty was covering for. The second step is testing the fear instead of just believing it. Fear is convincing, but it's rarely accurate. It tells you the worst outcome is certain, when usually it's just one possibility among many, and often not even the most likely one. If your fear says, I'll never survive without this job, ask yourself honestly, have I actually tested that? Or have I just assumed it because leaving feels too big to imagine clearly? Sometimes small tests help here. Updating a resume, even if you're not applying anywhere yet. Having one honest conversation with someone you trust about what leaving might actually look like. These small steps don't commit you to anything, but they start to show the fear that its predictions aren't automatically true. The third step is noticing your body, not just your thoughts. Fear often shows up physically before it shows up as a clear thought. A tight chest when you imagine bringing up a hard conversation. A knot in your stomach every Sunday night before a work week you dread. A specific kind of tiredness that shows up around one particular person and nowhere else in your life. These physical signals are worth paying attention to because the body is often more honest than the story you've been telling yourself. If your body reacts like something is wrong, that's information, even if your mind has a perfectly reasonable sounding explanation for why everything is actually fine. The fourth step is separating the decision to leave from the decision to be honest. These feel like the same thing, but they're not. You don't have to decide right now whether to quit the job or end the relationship. You just have to decide to be honest, first with yourself, and eventually, if it feels right, with the other person. A lot of people freeze because they think naming the fear means they have to act on it immediately. They don't. Naming it is simply the first step. What you do after that can happen slowly, carefully, on your own timeline. Before going further, it's worth saying something kind about this fear, because a lot of what's been said so far could sound like criticism, and that's not the intention. The fear that's been hiding behind the word loyalty made sense at some point. It probably kept you safe once, in a situation where leaving really was dangerous, where speaking up really did cost you something, where staying quiet really was the smartest available option at the time. The problem was never that the fear existed. The problem is that it kept running the same program years after the original danger was gone. A kid who learned that leaving was unsafe was often right about their specific situation at the time. An adult carrying that same belief into a relationship or a job that has nothing to do with the original danger is carrying an old map into new territory. And old maps, however useful they once were, eventually stop matching the ground you're actually standing on. This is worth remembering every time this work feels harder than it should. You're not fixing something broken. You're updating something that was built a long time ago by a younger version of you who was doing their best with what they had. That version of you deserves credit for surviving whatever taught them this pattern in the first place. The current version of you just gets to decide whether the pattern still fits the life you're actually living now. A few mistakes tend to show up once people start doing this work, and it helps to know about them ahead of time. The first is swinging too far the other way, deciding that because some staying is fear-based, all staying must be fear-based, and using that as a reason to leave everything that ever feels hard. That's not the point here. Some things are worth staying in, even when they're difficult, because they're genuinely important to you, not because you're scared to leave. The goal isn't to leave everything uncomfortable. It's to know the real reason you're staying in each specific thing, so the choice is actually yours. The second is expecting the fear to disappear the moment you name it. It usually doesn't. Naming a fear makes it smaller and more workable, but it rarely makes it vanish overnight. You might spend weeks knowing exactly what you're afraid of and still feel that fear strongly every time you think about acting on what you've learned. That's normal. Seeing the fear clearly is progress, even on the days it still feels loud. The third is doing this work and then immediately explaining it to everyone around you, expecting them to understand right away. Some people will. Others, especially the ones benefiting from your fear-based staying, might resist the idea entirely, insisting you really were just being loyal, that nothing needs to change. You don't need their agreement to know what's true for you. This is your own honest look at your own life, and it doesn't require anyone else's permission to be valid. Here's the harder question this eventually leads to, so it's worth answering directly instead of dancing around it. If you've been staying out of fear, does that mean you should leave? Not necessarily, and that surprises people. Sometimes, once the fear is named honestly, people realize they actually do want to stay just for real reasons this time instead of borrowed ones. A person might discover their fear was about starting over, but once they faced that fear directly, they found they still loved their partner, still wanted to build the relationship further, just from a place of choice instead of dread. That's not a failure of this process. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. Replace a fear-based reason with a real one, whatever the real one turns out to be. Other times, once the fear gets named clearly, the decision becomes obvious almost immediately. The relief of finally admitting the truth is often followed quickly by clarity about what to do next. This is common enough that it's worth expecting. A lot of people already know, somewhere quiet inside them, what they'd choose if fear weren't in the driver's seat. Naming the fear, honestly, just gives that quieter part of you room to finally speak up. Either way, the goal was never to convince you to leave anything. It was to make sure that whatever you choose, staying or going, you're choosing it, not defaulting to it because leaving felt too frightening to even consider honestly. Here's a fair question worth answering directly. Can the opposite also be fear? Can leaving quickly, walking away at the first sign of difficulty, also be a way of avoiding something rather than facing it? Yes, and it's worth naming clearly, because this video isn't arguing that leaving is automatically brave and staying is automatically weak. Some people run from anything that gets hard, not because they've honestly examined the relationship or the job and decided it isn't worth it, but because closeness itself feels dangerous, and leaving early protects them from ever having to find out if something could actually last. That's fear too. It just wears a different costume, one that looks like independence instead of loyalty. The test is the same either way. Ask what's actually driving the choice. If leaving quickly comes from a genuine, calm assessment that something isn't right, that's a real decision. If it comes from a reflex to bail the moment things get uncomfortable, before any real understanding of what's happening, that's fear again, just running in the opposite direction. This video isn't telling you to stay or to go. It's asking you to notice which one you're actually doing and why. This kind of honesty doesn't happen in one sitting, and it's worth expecting some resistance along the way, both from other people and from yourself. The first time you try to name a fear you've been calling loyalty, don't be surprised if part of you immediately tries to talk you out of it. That part built an entire identity around being the loyal one, the one who never gives up, and it won't hand that identity over without a fight, even when the fight is happening entirely inside your own head. Give yourself real time with this. A single honest sentence written on a piece of paper doesn't undo years of calling fear by a nicer name. It's normal to write the truth down, feel a wave of relief, and then a week later, catch yourself slipping right back into the old story, telling yourself it really was loyalty all along. That's not failure. That's how deeply learned patterns work. Each time you catch the slip and gently correct it, the old story loses a little more of its grip, even if it doesn't disappear completely for a long while. Some people notice a shift within weeks, once they've named the fear honestly and started testing it in small ways. Others carry the awareness for months before they feel ready to act on it. And that's fine too. There's no required timeline here. The only real measure of progress is whether you're getting more honest with yourself over time, not whether you've made a dramatic decision by any particular deadline. Once the fear finally gets named and faced, even a little, something noticeable tends to happen in how a person carries themselves day to day. Decisions that used to feel impossible, having a hard conversation, setting a boundary, saying no to something you'd have automatically said yes to before, start to feel merely difficult instead of unthinkable. That's a real shift, even if it doesn't look dramatic from the outside. People around you might notice before you fully register it yourself. A partner might comment that you seem more direct lately, less likely to swallow a complaint and pretend it wasn't there. A friend might notice you finally said no to something you'd have agreed to for years. These small moments add up, and they're worth paying attention to as proof that the work is actually changing something, even on the days it feels like nothing has shifted at all. This doesn't mean the fear disappears completely. Even after real progress, it can still show up in new situations, a new relationship, a new job, a family dynamic you thought you'd already worked through. That's not a sign of failure either. It just means the same honest question is worth asking again, every time it shows up. Is this loyalty, or is this fear borrowing loyalty's name one more time? The question gets easier to ask the more you've practiced it, even if the answer isn't always comfortable. There's a version of this that shows up in families especially, and it deserves its own mention because it often runs the deepest and gets defended the hardest. A grown child stays overly involved in a parent's life, taking every call, managing every crisis, showing up every single time, and calls it family loyalty. But underneath often is a fear that's been there since childhood, the fear that pulling back even slightly means losing love that always felt conditional on being available. This kind of loyalty rarely gets questioned because family loyalty is treated as sacred, almost beyond examination. But the same test applies here as everywhere else. Would you still show up this much if nothing bad happened when you didn't? Or does some part of you believe that stepping back, even a little, would cost you something you're not willing to risk? This one is especially hard to face because questioning it can feel like betraying the people who raised you. But questioning it isn't the same as abandoning them. It's just being honest about which parts of your involvement come from love, freely given, and which parts come from an old fear that never got the chance to update itself as you grew up. Friendships carry their own version of this, quieter but just as real. Think about a friendship that stopped feeling good years ago, one where you leave every hangout a little drained instead of a little lighter, but you keep showing up anyway because you've known each other since childhood or because ending it would mean admitting something had changed. People call this loyalty too. I don't abandon old friends, but sit with the actual feeling honestly, and often what's underneath isn't devotion. It's the fear of losing a piece of your own history, the fear of what it means about you if a 20-year friendship doesn't work anymore. There's also a quieter fear hiding in some of these friendships, the fear of being the one who leaves first. Nobody wants to be remembered as the friend who walked away, so people stay in friendships that have clearly run their course, sometimes for years, just to avoid being cast as the villain of a story that honestly doesn't need a villain at all. Friendships end sometimes. That's not a moral failure. But fear makes it feel like one. So loyalty gets used as the reason to keep showing up long after showing up stopped meaning anything real. Part of why this fear is so hard to spot is that the culture around us rewards it constantly. Staying gets celebrated. There are songs about never giving up, stories about people who stuck it out against all odds and were proven right in the end. Leaving rarely gets the same kind of praise, even when it's the healthier, harder choice. This creates a quiet pressure to interpret every instinct to leave as weakness and every instinct to stay as strength, regardless of what's actually driving either one. It's worth remembering that these stories get told because staying sometimes does work out. They don't get told nearly as often when staying was simply fear, dressed up and given a happy ending it didn't earn. You spent a long time believing that staying, no matter what, was the noble thing to do. That leaving in any form meant giving up, meant being disloyal, meant proving something bad about your character. But loyalty was never supposed to be about staying at any cost. It was supposed to be about choosing something because it's genuinely worth choosing, not because leaving felt too dangerous to consider. Fear will always find a nicer word to hide behind if you let it. Loyalty is one of its favorites because it sounds so much better than admitting you're scared. But you don't have to keep handing fear that word. You can call it what it actually is, look at it directly, and then decide, for real this time, what you actually want to do. That decision might look exactly like what you were already doing, or it might look completely different. Either way, it will finally be yours, not fear's wearing your name. Think about the specific thing that came to mind while you were watching this. A job, a relationship, a friendship, a role in your family you've played for so long. Nobody, including you, remembers when it started. Whatever it was, you already know, don't you? You knew before this video started. You just hadn't given yourself permission to call it what it is. That permission is the whole point. Not permission to leave, just permission to be honest about why you've stayed. What you do with that honesty is entirely up to you, and there's no wrong answer here, only an honest one and a borrowed one. You get to choose which kind of life you want to keep living from here. If this hits something in you, don't just nod along and move on. Take 1 minute today and finish that sentence honestly. If I left, the thing I'm most afraid would happen is, write down whatever comes up, even if it's uncomfortable. Tell me in the comments what you've been calling loyalty that might actually be fear. And if this reached you, the next video picks up exactly where this one leaves off. I'll see you there.